Hey folks, welcome to week 6 of GID 109, Intro to Web Design. How is everybody? Hope you're doing well, keeping busy. All right, what are we doing this week? Let's go down here and we'll take a look at our module, week 5. I hope you're watching all these weekly videos that I've been posting here. Lots of good information there weekly. All right, let's take a look at the week 6 module. Okay, so for week 6, we are still working with Project 1, our real-life redesign. We are just getting rolling on that. You guys turned in your first deliverable already. So this week we're going to talk about our second deliverable, and we're going to be wrapping up or heading towards the end of our historical speculative paper. So we'll talk about that. All right, so let's go through the module here. So first things first, the majority of this week, we're not introducing anything new this week. We are going to continue working on those two projects. Again, we're going to finish up the historical and speculative paper, and we're going to be working on the second deliverable for Project 1. So no new stuff. The only thing that is a little new is there is some media to consume here, which is basically your textbook reading for the week, which is this link here. What is the best screen size to design for? So that's this article here. I wanted you guys to look at this article because it's an interesting sort of thought process in that when we are designing for desktop websites, even if they're meant to be responsive, and even if they're meant to sort of resize themselves based on the window size or the device upon which they're being viewed, there is still a standard screen size to design for based on standard desktop sizes. Now, this has changed a lot over the years. This company here, which is Hobo Web UK SEO Services, they track these sorts of things, and there's a variety of companies and organizations that do this. It has changed a lot over the years simply because the technology behind computers and computer monitors has changed. Years ago, of course, one of the most common sizes for screens was 800 pixels by 600 pixels, which by today's standards is rather small. Many monitors today are, 2,000, 3,000 pixels wide by 2,000 pixels high approximately, at very high resolution, very high pixel density. And so web sizes can be a lot bigger. But we also interact with our desktop computers differently. What we are viewing on the desktop normally does not take up your entire screen anymore. We are more likely to have floating windows, sort of like I have here, right? So I have this floating window with another floating window behind it. We don't really eat up our entire screen real estate with what we're looking at on a desktop computer, simply because of the size and resolution of most monitors these days. Now, of course, on laptop computers, it gets smaller, even though the resolution is still very high. The physical size is smaller, and therefore you are more likely to use up your entire screen real estate for one window at a time. You won't really get to see the other windows behind it. But even that depends on which laptop you are on. So as a result, the standard size for a desktop website design really kind of fluctuates now. There is no one good answer. So this article sort of goes into that and explains what that's all about. It gives you some statistics on how these various sizes are used or accessed more prominently. It gives you some information about how they came up with this. And this is kind of a good behind-the-scenes, nuts and bolts kind of article about things that are related to web design that aren't exactly web design. As web designers, there's a lot of things we need to be aware of, not just how to design the actual website. We need to be really aware of the technology and the presentation possibilities that are available for the websites we're designing. When smart mobile devices came along, approximately around 2008, it really changed the game for responsive web design and added a whole bunch of other types of destinations. But desktop designs did not go away. They work in conjunction with mobile. And even though we're sort of living in an age of mobile-first design, desktop design remains an important part of web design. And so understanding the sort of analytics and the data behind that is really important. Now, again, I don't expect anybody to be an expert in this sort of stuff, but I think being aware of it and knowing about these types of websites, like these guys here, and that sort of data crunching that they do is really a good back-end bit of information that as a budding web designer you should really be aware of. At the bottom here there's a table of contents of other related information. Feel free to dig deeper into the reading if you find this interesting. I think you really should as we sort of make our way through this. And it's a fairly long article. giving a variety of different data visualizations, talking about usage and whatnot over a period of recent history. And you can look into the stuff historically too, as you can see. Just looking at this here, you can see that, you know, the smallest size is currently used is 1280 by 800. Even that's bigger than the 800 by 600 that was common many years ago, and that's only about 4% of the computing population. So anyway, read through this. This is your reading homework for the week, like your textbook reading. Make sure you read through that. Okay, moving on back to our module. So what are we doing here? Let's talk about where we are with a historical and speculative paper. So you've already turned in part 1, right? And here's an example of part 1. This is what part 1 might have looked like for you, right? You determined what your inquiry question was and turned that in, and you would have determined your initial sources, just a handful of sources that you would be using to do further research on, and maybe you came up with a real basic plan of attack. So you guys have all turned in part 1 already. This is an example of what it would have looked like. So great, we're done with that. Now from there, you would have then gone on to part 2, which should also be done by now, where you are restating your inquiry question. The reason why I asked you to restate it is because maybe in doing your research, it changed a little bit, right? Maybe you made some adjustments to it. Maybe you didn't change your question entirely, but maybe you sort of changed the focus of it a little bit. And that's okay, because that's what happens when we do further research. We learn more things and we say, oh, maybe my first question wasn't exactly what I want it to be. Let me update that a little bit. So you restate your question. And here you are then going into your sources, which are probably the same sources you had back here, or maybe a couple of additional ones, and you're annotating them. So basically you're putting in your opinion about the usefulness of each of these, just in sort of paragraph or bullet format. So again, here's an example of that, that a former student of mine did, just to give you an idea of how these things look like. No, his name was not actually Bugs Bunny. I just put that in there. So that's part 2. So now this week, we are going to dive into part 3. So now that you've done all your research and you've settled on your inquiry question and you're really certain what you're going to do, now it's time to write the actual paper, which I'll show you an example of that in a second. But of course, to go back to the handout about it, so we'll go down here to the 3 deliverables. Like I said, part 1's done, part 2's done. You're now going to get rolling on part 3, which falls under presentation of findings. And that is a part A and a part B, right? You're going to write the actual paper, and then you're going to create a digital poster or a digital graphic to go with it. Note that this is due week 7, the end of week 7, which would be the Saturday of week 7. This is week 6. So you've got 2 weeks to finish this part. So you've got 2 weeks to write your paper and 2 weeks to create the digital poster, and it's not due till end of the day on Saturday of week 7. So you're in good shape in terms of time. Maybe you've even started writing it already. All right, so let's go down to the section of part 3, just to make sure that we actually know what we're doing here. Okay, so part 3, presentation of findings. So, like it says here in the handout, now it's time to write your paper and create your digital poster. It's sort of like a term paper or book report, but a little more advanced and presented along with a piece of digital art. So you have to create your digital poster digitally, obviously. You can use any software that you would like, whatever you already know. This is not a project where I'm asking you to learn a new piece of software. If you already know Adobe Spark, or if you're comfortable with Photoshop or Illustrator, or even Canva or some other graphics creation software, whatever you want to use, you can use to create your piece of digital art that's going to act as a cover page for your written report, okay? So however you want to make it is entirely up to you. So if you're already familiar with the digital tool, even if you're trying out a new digital tool on your own, that's fine, but I'm not going to tell you to use something new. It's totally up to you. Now again, you've got 2 full weeks to work on this along with writing the paper. So make sure you leave yourself enough time to sort of play around and explore with what you want to do. Now, these little miniature digital posters you're making, they, of course, are a piece of art. They're meant to be a little more stimulating to a group of viewers as presented, right? They act as a good cover page. They could also be projected up on a screen as a digital poster. And, of course, as with any art, they must be visually interesting and engaging. Specifically, they should be designed to educate, tell a story, and help persuade, right? Ultimately, your final presentation must tell a clear and interesting story on its own without any verbal explanation. And of course, since it's acting as a cover page to your written paper, it'll be a really good graphic for the beginning of that. Okay, now let's look at the specification. So first of all, let's talk about the paper that you're going to write. Make sure you name it like this, your last name underscore paper. It's 3 pages of writing, 1,500 word minimum, okay? So it's not a huge paper, but 3 pages of writing, 1,500 word minimum. 1-inch margin all the way around. Obviously, you're going to do this in either Microsoft Word, Google Docs, or Apple Pages, whichever desktop publishing software you are comfortable with. So that's the paper. Next, the digital poster. The poster, like we said, you're going to name it the same thing, your last name, but underscore digital poster. It's going to be approximately 3,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels, maximum of 1 length. So you can make it a square, you can make it a rectangle, it could be a vertical rectangle or a horizontal rectangle, just no bigger than 300 pixels in length on one side, 3,000 pixels, sorry. No margins. This is going to be a full bleed graphic, meaning you're going to run right off the edge of the digital paper. Do it in full color, and since we're presenting this digitally, then it's going to be RGB color mode, but don't worry about that too much. And then you're going to publish it as either a PDF or a PNG so that we can add it to the front of our paper, or you can turn it in separately. That's fine too. You can use transparency if you would like. If you want to have pieces of the graphic be see-through, I'm okay with that. That works out good too. Okay, so we sort of covered the why of the poster. Let's talk about the why of the paper. Well, this is pretty straightforward. The whole point of the paper is you're going to now answer in your own words, based on your research, the question that you posed. So here's an example of part 3, which you're going to turn in, which again, my former student, Bugs Bunny here, did. So this is part 3, and their question was, what type of negative impact is social media having on people with social anxiety? That's the question they settled on, and now the writing, the 3 pages of writing, is basically them trying to answer the question. Now, this student actually did 4 pages of writing, which is fine, but they did get to about 1,500 words, which works out nicely. And you're going to use your own research to try to answer the question that you pose to the best of your ability. Now, as we talked about at the beginning of all this, these questions that we're asking don't necessarily have definitive answers, so don't feel like you have to write a paper that lands on a black and white answer or a series of definitive answers. If anything, you can pose more questions or point to more research. You're simply exploring the question, trying to answer it to the best of your ability, and continue the conversation, okay? So that is your goal here, to write 3 pages attempting to answer this question based on all the wonderful research that you have done. Be sure to cite your research, put in footnotes or endnotes. I don't really care which one, whichever method in which you want to cite your work, and get working on your paper, okay? That is that for that section. All right, if you have any questions about the historical speculative paper, be sure to email me and ask or drop in on the office hours. Okay, next, back to our module. Also this week, we are going to get started on, or we're going to continue with and finish up deliverable number 2 for Project 1, right? Now, if you remember, from Project 1, deliverable 2. So here is Project 1, right? You're doing your real-life redesign. You picked an existing website and you're redesigning it for the desktop. Now you've already completed your prep steps. We did this in the discussion forum on Blackboard, so that's all done. And you know your specifications, so that's good. So now we are moved into our web design project workflow, which we introduced a few weeks ago. So you know what that is, right? These different steps. So you've already turned in deliverable 1, which is your responses to steps 1 through 3 and your initial sketches from step 4. Okay, so those are done. Those are already turned in. Next, this week, we are diving into deliverable 2, which is a set of wireframes that you are making. And you're going to go out and do some usability testing using your wireframe. So you're going to turn in your usability testing report. Now, if you don't remember what these things are, remember we went over, where is it? Here we go. We went over wireframe mockups back around week 3, and this handout is available there, where we talked about what wireframes are, how you draw them, how you create them. They're simple paper drawings on dot paper or graph paper that represent sort of the look and feel of your site using simple graphics, simple text, so that if you slide them in front of somebody one screen at a time, they know what they're doing. You can give them a bunch of tasks and ask them to make their way through your wireframes to see if the workability and the usability of your proposed site works. Now, once you have your wireframes done, you're going to move over here to this handout, which we also gave you in week 3. What is usability testing? And this is where we're actually going to go do our usability testing. So I told you guys back in week 3 to identify a couple of people in your life who can help you with this, right? Who can actually do the usability testing for you. It could be anybody that you know. You can do it in person using the paper ones, or if you scan your paper wireframes or photograph them, you can do it digitally and have somebody do it remotely for you because maybe you can't get together in person, so that's okay too. You're going to follow these steps. It's all really easy. This is everything you need. It's just a one-page document. This is a very simple version of usability testing, so you should be able to get through this very easily. Make sure you follow these steps. Again, we went over this in week 3, but this is just to remind you. Okay, so that's what's getting done this week, and these are due at the end of the week. So end of the week, make sure you check the due dates under projects here, and you'll know the exact due dates, but it's basically due the end of the week. You're going to turn in both the deliverable 2 of project 1, and you're going to keep working on part 3 of the historical speculative paper, but that's not due till the end of week 7, so you've got lots of time to work on that. However, this here, you're going to keep working on into next week as well. So just to clarify, because I just totally jumbled myself, these are both due next week, week 7. Nothing is due this week in week 6. Okay, just to clarify, nothing is due in week 6. You're just going to keep working on the historical speculative paper, part 3, and you're going to work on deliverable 2 of project 1. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to be confusing. So nothing is due week 6. All of this stuff is due next week. So this week is just about working on all this stuff, okay? Okay, I hope that's clear. All right, and that is it for this week. I'm not going to introduce anything else. I'm not going to remind you of anything else. I am just going to tell you to keep working on your stuff, okay? If you have any questions, thoughts, or concerns, be sure to email me. If you want to hop into the weekly Zoom office hours, remember that those are held every Monday and Friday. Right here's the information under announcements on Zoom between 10 and 3. Certainly hop in, and I would be happy to talk to you in person and go over whatever you would like to go over, okay? All right, good luck working on those things. I look forward to seeing everybody's stuff, and I will talk to you soon.